Act 1, Scene 3 of Macbeth is the catalyst. It's where the action begins. It's where we see the titular character for the first time, Macbeth. It's where they meet with the witches, the three weird sisters, and it starts, in a sense, the central conflict of the play. It's where Shakespeare kind of introduces the kind of, in a sense, the kind of the beginnings of the tragic hero of Macbeth. We're going to do this in three parts. To do it all would take too long in one go. So maybe we'll spend about 10-15 minutes just talking you through this particular scene. So it begins, as in Act 1, Scene 1, with the witches. And here they're kind of on the heath again. It's near the kind of king's, kind of near the king's castle and forest, King Duncan. And so it's after the war, and the guys are making their way home. And this is, where's the been, sister, killing swine? Sister, where were thou? A sailor's wife had chestnuts in her lap and munched and munched and munched. Give me, quoth I, around thee, witch, the rump-fed Runyon cries. Her husband's to Aleppo gone, master of the Tiger, but in a sieve I'll leather sail, and like a rat without a tail I'll do, and I'll do. Now, in a sense, there's something quite poetic, but something quite horrible about this, because in a sense, we have the witch she's annoyed. She's kind of cheesed off because this particular sailor's wife didn't give her any chestnuts. So what she's done, she's putting a curse, not on the woman, but on her husband, who is master of the Tiger. So he's a captain. He's a sea captain, and the Tiger is a ship. And so they'll go off, and we get this sort of imagery of, in a sieve they'll sail. We can't sail in a sieve, but all these impossible feats that witches were credited with, all right, and ill winds. And then we get this idea of kind of like this sort of what they're going to do to him. She's going to, in a sense, drain him as dry as hay. And it basically, yet she'll be tempest tossed again, kind of thrown on the seas of life. And again, what they do is kind of quite horrible here, in a sense. Shakespeare's emphasizing how evil these people are, that for just some cause slight, an insult, they're willing to kill someone. And here is this kind of quite grotesque: a pilot's thumb wrecked as homeward he did come. And a pilot, in a sense, is like a smaller sort of ship who guides the larger ships into port. And the pilot, in a sense, here in this is drowned, and they've got his thumb. And with that, they're going to do some sort of evil magic. And then you hear the drum. A drum, a drum. Macbeth doth come, and that sort of evil cadence. And here they do their little sort of, little ritual. The weird sisters hand in hand, posters of the sea and land, thus do go about, thrice to thine, and thrice to mine, and thrice again to make up nine. Peace, the charms wound up. And enter Macbeth and Banquo, and we see this kind of this dark, heavy presence over the play. And when you're seeing them and they come through, and Macbeth's kind of interesting first lines are, "So foul and fair a day I have not seen." And this, in a sense, echoes what we've heard in Act 1, Scene 1, with fair is foul and foul is fair. And so again, there's this emphasis that sort of Macbeth is part of something that he may not be aware of, that perhaps he may be evil too. And it's that sort of, that beauty. And it kind of, again, that confusion that you get with Act 1, Scene 2, where we find out that he's actually quite a noble character, a brave and noble character, loyal, and here we see this. And, then Banquo says, "How forest to forest, but are these so withered and so wild in their attire?" So Banquo sees them. He doesn't immediately kind of realize they're witches, but yeah, he recognizes them. They're different. that look like not inhabitants of the earth, and yet are on't. Live you, or are you aught that man may question? You seem to understand me by each once her choppy finger laying upon her skinny lips. You would be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you're so. And what I like about Banquo here, in a sense, he's kind of talking. They've been through a battle. They've survived a pretty brutal war. And here he gives us this description, in a sense, of what they look like. These bearded women. And in a way, there's almost a jocular tone. There's almost like he's like poking fun at them, in a sense. And he's not really taking it seriously. And then Macbeth. Speak, if you can. What are you? And then we get the beginning of the whole shebang. All hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Glamis. All hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor. And the third which, all hail Macbeth, that you shall be king hereafter. And these declarations are the catalyst. These are the things that is basically going to drive Macbeth as he tears his way through this awful tragedy. And so we've got, in a sense, here we are, the Thane of Glamis. He is the Thane of Glamis. He's the Lord of Glamis, and that's in northern Scotland. So he's on his way home. Okay? Now, the Thane of Cawdor, remember, from Act 2, no more the Thane of Cawdor shall deceive. Well, here we've got the Thane of Cawdor. Now, what we know in this beautiful piece of dramatic irony, all right, where we, the audience, know something that the characters don't, that we know that Macbeth is going to be, in a sense, take on the lordship of Cawdor. He will become now the Thane of Cawdor, and he will kind of have all these lands and things like that. He doesn't know it yet, all right, but the witches know. Okay, and finally, the third witch. All hail Macbeth, thou shalt be king hereafter. Now that's a doozy, okay? 3 things, okay? One of them which is true, 2 of them which are true, and 1, in a sense, that is just beyond his comprehension. Now look at Banquo, all right? What he says here, good sir, why do you start? Okay, what have I done here? Why do you start? The things that do sound so fair in the name of truth, are ye fantastical? Or what indeed which outwardly ye show my noble partner? Okay, so here, in a sense, we get this, good sir, why do you start? Now, start. Now, you'd probably be aware of, startled. Well, in a sense, Macbeth is startled. He kind of almost falls off his horse, in a sense. So there we are. I start. What do you seem to fear? Things that do sound so fair in the name of truth. Are ye fantastical, or what indeed which outwardly show my noble partner? Right, let's return that back to where it was. Okay. Now here, in a sense, we kind of, there's couple of things here. Banquo doesn't take these witches seriously at all. He's just absolutely kind of, nonplussed. He doesn't really believe that they're anything fantastical. But Macbeth does. And here there's just that little hint. Why do you start? Why do you seem to fear things that sound so fair? Now remember, back in the old days, all right, it wasn't like you kind of applied to be a king or a lord, and there were no applications. You got through blood who you were related to. Now, obviously, in a state where there's king as the top of the kind of hierarchical tree, everybody would have wanted to be king. Everybody, from the serfs, the people who worked the land, the peasants, the kind of minor nobles, all the way through, people would have desired to be the king. It was the head honcho. And Macbeth is no different, only in a sense. It's almost like they've spoken into his mind and touched something, and that what they've touched is his ambition. He is ambitious, and this, in a sense, is what starts this whole thing. Great with present grace and great prediction of noble having and of royal hope. that he seems rapt with all, that he's so kind of enraptured with what he sees, he basically can't figure out, what's going on. To speak to me, you speak not. If you can look into the seeds of time and say which grain will grow and which will not, speak then to me, who neither beg nor fear your favors nor your hate. And this is important, this little thing here. To neither beg nor fear your favors or your hate. In a sense, he's indifferent to them. To him, it's just a bit of a laugh. So what have you got to say for me? And yeah, it's kind of interesting because he doesn't particularly care, where Macbeth does. And we see this kind of quite clear division between the two of them. In a way, it kind of gives us an indication that Macbeth is actually probably a superstitious person, where Banquo is much more rational. He's grounded more in rationality, and we'll see that a little bit later on. Verse which says, Hail, 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 lesser than Macbeth and greater. Not so happy, yet much happier. You shall get kings, though they be none. So all hail Macbeth and Banquo. Banquo and Macbeth, all hail. And here, okay, we get this really interesting insight into the kind of the equivocation, this idea that kind of the Banquo's better than Macbeth, but lesser, and that happier and not much happier. And we get this kind of like this ambiguity that comes through. And it sort of strikes the two of them. Macbeth, now, how he reacts is really interesting. Stay, you imperfect speakers, tell me more. By Sinel's death, now Sinel is his father, okay? I know I'm Thane of Glamis by the death of Sinel, okay, my father. I have inherited the title of Glamis. But have Cawdor. The Thane of Cawdor lives a prosperous gentleman, and to be king stands not within the proposed of belief, no more than to be Cawdor. Say from whence ye owe this strange intelligence, or why upon this blasted heath you stop our way with such prophetic greeting. Speak, I charge you. And then the witches vanish. And this is a sort of classic kind of thing that happens. Sometimes they, when they appear in things, they run away. But here, I want you to look at something here. Here he doesn't quite believe it. It stands not when the prospect of belief, no more than to be Cawdor. Okay, to be king, it's not possible. It's really not possible. Okay, the strange intelligence. Okay, where's this really weird information come from? Why upon this blasted heath you stop our way? And we get this kind of almost kind of like quite dark and brooding sense. And then Banquo, immediately, the rationalist, he says, oh, well, the earth hath bubbles, as the water has, and these are them. Whither are they vanished? And we kind of get the sense here that Banquo's kind of rationalizing it. Yeah, I mean, I know they disappeared, but, they disappeared somewhere that you can reasonably explain, Macbeth. Into the air, the what seemed corpulent, the body to do with real physical, melted as breath into the wind. Would they had stayed. And I love that. Would they had stayed! Exclamation mark. There's a desire there. He seems to he wants to hear more of what's going on. And so we get this kind of, the two of them, and Banquo's quite rational. Yeah, well, there's things that we don't quite understand. I mean, the earth had bubbles and they've just disappeared in here where we can't see them anymore. And Macbeth gives a more almost superstitious, supernatural kind of air to that he seemed corporal and merged it as breath into wind. Okay. Were such things as we do speak about, or have we eaten on the insane root which takes the reason prisoner? And I love this. This is Banquo to a T. He is rational. He believes in reason. He believes in philosophy, I suppose. Do we eat of the insane root? Did we just take something? Did we smoke some dope? That can't be true because what we just saw doesn't make any sense. Macbeth says, "Your children shall be kings." Macbeth says, "You shall be king." And Macbeth, and Thane of Cawdor too, when it not so. So the self-same tune and words. Who's here? Enter Ross and Angus. Ross and Angus, okay, are two noblemen, okay, like Banquo Macbeth. Okay, so to kind of sum up Act 1, Scene 1, that first part up until we've done the witches, okay, we get a sense that Shakespeare's introducing us to the kind of the different characters that Banquo and Macbeth are. Banquo's more rational, more reason. He sees reason. He's not afraid of the supernatural. Where we see Macbeth, in a sense, is quite superstitious. He feels these things that they've managed to see into his mind. And in a way, we kind of see that little hints here. Would they had stayed? He wants to know more about this, especially when it's very favourable that you're going to become king, when there's almost little chance of doing that. And this sets up later on in Act 1 things that he needs to overcome. And this is the perfect Shakespeare, how it all fits together. Okay.